Morning. Okay, so quick one. Back onto Of Mice and Men. Been thinking about it a bit at the moment because it looks like I'm going to be teaching it or doing it again with Year 11 next year, so it's on my mind. I want to talk about it as a political novel, and I want to talk about the character of the boss. Obviously, I would hope it's obvious to you, Of Mice and Men is an explicitly political novel. Whatever else Steinbeck wants to do with the themes of friendship or to look at prejudice, he also wants to make a fairly scathing criticism of the socio-economic status of America in the period he's writing about, and perhaps specifically the way in which society and the economy treated the itinerant agricultural labourers that he focuses on. Hopefully, you've done some contextual research and you've seen some of the ways that these men and the families were treated, and you've seen some of the genuinely atrocious things that went on. You've read about ranch bosses who would charge exorbitant rents to live in the bunkhouses. So at the end of every month, they would pay with one hand and then simply take it all back again with the other. Ranch owners who insisted that the people who worked for them only shop in the stores that they had attached to their ranches, where they charged exorbitant prices, and so once again they would pay with one hand and remove it again with the other. People who charged fines or had sort of unreasonable expectations of the ways in which people would live. People who ran their farms in incredibly dangerous fashions and did not look after the people that worked for them. This was pretty common, and you would think, if it was your intention to write an explicitly political novel critiquing this in a scathing fashion the socio-economic reality of the time, then you might include some of these things. But actually, perhaps a bit weirdly, on the face of it, the boss in Of Mice and Men is not a monster. If we consider some of the things we know about him, and we don't know much, he's not an important character. He's obviously incredibly important in that he represents, the moneyed classes, the ranch owners. He represents power, economic power, in this novel. But he's not very present, actually. He's only in one scene and he's talked about a bit. But if we consider what we do know about him, what we learn about him from his behaviour and what we learn about him from the other men, then the picture we get here is not of a completely appalling human being. Consider Candy. Candy has lost his hand, as we spoke about in another video, and can no longer work as a ranch hand. So Candy is employed as the swamper. He cleans out the bunkhouse and does some odd jobs around the place. Candy also, we know, has some savings because he was given money as recompense or as compensation for having lost his hand on the farm. What I want you to consider here is that giving Candy money because he lost his hand, giving Candy a job so he can continue to work, these are not necessarily things that one might expect a ranch owner of the period to have done. Candy was a resource. He was a resource that was no longer any use because he lost his hand. Most of them would have fired him instantly. He would have been sent on his way. So the fact that the boss is shown to have responded to Candy's misfortune with a certain amount of humanity is interesting. More broadly, we get sort of flashes of the boss being at least partially interested in the lives of his workers. We know that he questions George in the one time we meet him as to his relationship with Lenny and why it is that Lenny's sort of answering for Lenny, and he wants to make certain that George isn't exploiting Lenny. Well, that's interesting, because why on earth would he care? It doesn't make any difference, surely, other than an example of his basic humanity. Down to sort of silly things, like we know that at Christmas, he brought them in a gallon of whiskey and said, "Boys, you have fun," and things, and he thinks to a certain extent about his worker. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, he's not shown to be some great humanitarian. He does nothing noble or generous or kind or anything of that sort through the course of the novel. He's barely in it. But he is described as a pretty straight kind of guy, and what little we know of his behaviour seems to be fair, just, and humane. So why? Why not make this about an evil overseer who exploits and abuses his workers? Why have this essentially decent man? Well, because it's not okay, is it? Because George and Lenny and Carlson and Wit and Candy and Slim and all the rest of them are still living lives of enormous, barren depravity. You know, they are without privacy, without nobility, without dignity. They are given no chance to escape from this situation. They are trapped in poverty and in labour by the system, and the system is the point. If this figure, the boss figure, had been this monster, if Steinbeck had created an arrogant, overweening, vicious man, and spent time showing us how horrible it was to work on this ranch, well, then this would be a novel about this ranch. And Steinbeck doesn't want this to be a novel about this ranch. Steinbeck wants this to be a novel about ranch working in the round, all of it. This, the place that George and Lenny find themselves in, is in some ways about as good as it can get for them. They are fed, they are clothed, they are housed, they are working in a place where both workers' safety is considered, and we are led to believe will be looked after and they will be protected should anything bad happen to them. It's amazing in comparison to some of the other ranches in California at the time, and yet it's still awful, because the system that traps these men into this labour, into this poverty, is unchanged. This is as good as it can be. It's dreadful. It's an awful life. And that's what Steinbeck wants us to see. He doesn't want to talk about one ranch owner, a bad time on one ranch. He wants us to see that the entire socio-economic system of the time is exploitative, abusive, and ultimately was a trap out of which men could not escape. All right, cheers. Thank you.